Gilded Age, and if you're not invited to Mrs. Astor's parties, then I am sorry to say that makes you a virtual nobody. She was the undisputed queen of old New York society, Mrs. Caroline Astor, universally known as the Mrs. Astor. To receive an invitation was to be anointed, to be recognized as part of the exclusive 400, the creme de la creme of old money. Her approval was the most coveted prize, a golden ticket to the inner sanctum of power and prestige, especially as a new wave of new money millionaires desperately sought to crack her impenetrable social code. But beyond the glittering chandeliers and the rustle of silk gowns, what truly went on behind the velvet ropes? Prepare yourself, because the reality of Mrs. Astor's legendary soirees was far more peculiar than you might imagine, highlighted by the fact that Mrs. Astor's calling card was the only one that truly mattered. During the Gilded Age, calling cards were far more than simple pieces of paper. They were intricate tools of social communication, acting as both an entry pass into someone's home and a tangible badge, signifying that a certain person had graced the doorstep of your residence. The practice of calling, or dropping in, was a highly formalized ritual, permissible and even encouraged, but only if it meticulously adhered to a complex set of social rules. Upon arrival at a house, the visitor's card, often exquisitely engraved, would be presented to the head butler at the front door. The butler would then forward it on a silver tray to the lady of the house, who would, from her private sitting room, decide whether or not to receive the caller. Her reply was conveyed not through words, but through the precise folding of specific corners of the card, indicating her wishes. Perhaps a folded top right corner for a personal call, or a folded bottom left to signify to take leave if she was departing the city, or simply left unfolded to indicate she was not at home or not receiving. In the case of Mrs. Astor, her calling card transcended these general rules. It was, quite simply, the ultimate badge of honor and social currency. While other cards might grant you a polite reception, Mrs. Astor's was the only name on a calling card that guaranteed you entry to any and all socially elite events happening in the neighborhood, from the most exclusive balls to the most intimate dinners. To possess her card, or more importantly, to have her leave her card at your residence, was an unequivocal sign of your acceptance into the most rarefied strata of New York society. Without her endorsement, even the wealthiest newcomers found themselves on the outside looking in, regardless of their financial might. And as an aside, I just want to throw in the fact that Mrs. Astor wasn't the most beautiful socialite of the Gilded Age. Much to her chagrin, and despite her immense power, the elder Mrs. Caroline Astor was not considered a conventional beauty by the standards of her time. Contemporary accounts and surviving descriptions suggest she had strong, somewhat severe features, a rather robust and short figure, and dark hair which she apparently dyed to maintain its youthful luster, a common practice among women of means seeking to defy the visible signs of aging. This lack of striking physical attractiveness was a source of private vexation for a woman who commanded such public attention and who valued presentation above all else. Because Mrs. Astor was acutely aware of her appearance and reportedly disliked how she looked in photographs, very few images of her exist, making her visual representation in history somewhat elusive. There is, of course, the one iconic portrait of her by the renowned French artist Carolus Duran, painted in Paris in 1890. This grand full-length oil painting, now held by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, depicts her in a magnificent gown, adorned with her famous pearls and diamonds, projecting an image of regal authority and timeless elegance rather than conventional beauty. Mrs. Astor meticulously ensured that this painting was placed prominently in her New York house, specifically in the grand ballroom or a reception area. It was her preferred public image, and she would often stand directly in front of it when receiving guests for her elaborate receptions, almost as if to align herself with the idealized, stately figure on the canvas, reinforcing her formidable status and carefully curated persona. Now, about those parties, or should I say, balls. From the 1870s until the early 1900s, Mrs. Astor presided over literally thousands of parties and balls at her opulent mansions on Fifth Avenue, each meticulously planned and executed. Among these, her annual ball was undoubtedly the most highly anticipated event of the social season, a true litmus test of one's standing in New York society. In its early years, this coveted event was always held on a Monday night in January at her original Fifth Avenue brownstone, a tradition that cemented its place as the unofficial start of the social year. Later, with her move uptown, the ball transitioned to her magnificent new mansion on the Upper East Side, where its scale and splendor only increased. These gatherings were not merely opportunities for entertainment, they were carefully orchestrated displays of wealth, power, and social hierarchy, where alliances were forged, reputations were made or broken, and the unwritten rules of Gilded Age society were rigorously enforced. So let's move on to the 7 weird, crazy, or downright odd things you might not have known about the parties and balls that Mrs. Astor hosted during the Gilded Age of New York high society. 1. Only the elite of the elite could attend. The earlier parties, held at Mrs. Astor's old brownstone, were elitist to the extreme, serving as the most exclusive gatherings in New York. These soirees were frequented only by those on the legendary 400 list, a number famously derived from the capacity of Mrs. Astor's ballroom, which her social secretary, Warden McAllister, declared was the maximum number of people who could comfortably fit and be properly entertained in her home. This list was the ultimate social register, and inclusion on it was the sole determinant of one's social standing. However, as the new money industrialist families moved into town, amassing fortunes that dwarfed those of many old money families, their sheer economic power and persistent social climbing eventually began to erode Mrs. Astor's rigid barriers. While she initially resisted, the Vanderbilt's sheer audacity and wealth eventually forced Mrs. Astor's hand. Consequently, as the social landscape shifted and she moved to her new mansion, that exclusive number expanded to fill her 1,200-capacity ballroom, a grudging acknowledgement that the definition of elite was slowly but surely broadening to include those who had earned their wealth through modern enterprise. 2. Mrs. Astor had a thing for nude ladies. In the grand ballroom at Mrs. Astor's new mansion, which also served as her impressive art gallery, one would find, prominently displayed, a large portrait of a female nude. This was quite a bold statement for the era, given the prevailing Victorian sensibilities regarding art and public display, particularly in a setting meant for the most refined social gatherings. It seems that Mr. William K. Vanderbilt, a prominent figure among the new money, found this particular piece of art distasteful, perhaps viewing it as a breach of decorum or a sign of an older generation's eccentricities. However, Mrs. Astor's position was unassailable. She was the Mrs. Astor, and her taste, however unconventional, was not to be publicly questioned by anyone, least of all a new millionaire. Beyond this prominent painting, she also possessed a nude statue of Venus, the Roman goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation, which was strategically placed in her formal dining room, a space where guests would gather for elaborate meals. There were indeed reports of even more nude female statues strategically placed around the house, suggesting a consistent, if slightly provocative, aesthetic preference on her part. Perhaps as a subtle challenge to the prudishness of the era, or simply an expression of her personal appreciation for classical art. 3. Mrs. Astor would wear a diamond tiara to her parties. It was widely reported that at one particularly grand party thrown at her magnificent Upper East Side mansion, Mrs. Astor made a truly dazzling entrance. She was said to have donned an elaborate diamond tiara, a breathtaking piece of high society jewelry that glittered with countless facets, along with her signature diamond necklace, often referred to as her dog collar due to its substantial size and close fit around her neck. This magnificent display of diamonds was worn in conjunction with a sophisticated black velvet, off-the-shoulder gown, a choice that emphasized her plunging neckline and provided a stark, elegant backdrop for the brilliance of her jewels. The combination created an aura of regal splendor, reinforcing her image as the queen of New York society. Such displays of extravagant jewelry were commonplace at Gilded Age balls, where socialites vied to outshine one another, but Mrs. Astor's collection and her manner of wearing them always commanded the most attention and respect. 4. The common goal at each party was marriage. The patriarch balls, established by Mrs. Astor and her social secretary Ward McAllister, were indeed famously known as marriage marts, and for good reason. They were in essence highly structured social events designed with a singular paramount objective: to secure advantageous marriages for the daughters of elite families. Mrs. Astor, herself a mother of 4 daughters, took this role very seriously, meticulously arranging a series of subscription balls to find appropriate, well-connected, and financially secure husbands for her own children and for the eligible debutantes of her inner circle. To maintain society's strict exclusivity and ensure the highest caliber of matches, only 25 carefully chosen gentlemen, the patriarchs themselves, were initially invited. These gentlemen were then entrusted with the privilege and responsibility of bringing 9 additional guests each, specifically 4 debutantes, young women formally introduced to society, ready for marriage, and 5 eligible bachelors. These events were not about romantic love in the modern sense, but about the consolidation of wealth, status, and family lineage, with every dance and every conversation potentially leading to a lifelong union that would benefit both families. 5. Polkas were not allowed. In the highly conservative social climate of the Gilded Age, particularly within Mrs. Astor's rigidly proper circle, strict rules governed every aspect of public behavior, including dance. Ladies of that time were expected to maintain an almost impenetrable veil of modesty, and showing any hint of ankle or calf during a dance was considered highly improper, even scandalous. Therefore, lively and energetic dances like the polka were explicitly banned from Mrs. Astor's balls. The polka, with its quick hopping steps and close partnering, had a tendency to cause skirts to swish and rise, inadvertently revealing what was considered vulgar or unseemly parts of a woman's body, her ankles and lower legs. Such a display was deemed a grave breach of decorum and a threat to the carefully cultivated image of feminine propriety. Instead, more sedate and controlled dances like the waltz, quadrille, and cotillion, which allowed for graceful, flowing movements without revealing too much, were preferred and strictly enforced, ensuring that the visual spectacle of the ball remained within the bounds of strict Victorian morality. 6. If you attended, you couldn't talk about body parts. Mrs. Astor placed an exceptionally high value on decorum and propriety, which were the cornerstones of her social reign and largely upheld by women at the time. At her gatherings, the conversational rules were as strict as the dance rules. There could be absolutely no mention of legs, or, for that matter, any other body parts. Such topics were considered indelicate, vulgar, and entirely inappropriate for polite conversation in mixed company. The emphasis was on intellectual or superficial pleasantries, never on anything that might hint at the physical or the intimate. Furthermore, and perhaps even more stringently enforced, a lady was expected to never, under any circumstances, be alone with a man at any time, even for a moment. This rule was specifically prohibited to safeguard a woman's reputation and virtue, as any private interaction could lead to speculation and social ruin. Chaperones were ubiquitous, and every social interaction was conducted under the watchful eye of society, ensuring that the delicate balance of reputation and respectability was meticulously maintained. 7. You truly were nobody if you weren't invited to the secret after-hours feast. As the grand ball stretched into the early hours and the majority of guests took their leave, a subtle transformation would occur at Mrs. Astor's mansion. Without announcement, small, elegantly set tables would magically appear in the ballroom or adjoining salons, signaling the start of a secret midnight supper. This exclusive feast was not for everyone. Only those deemed the true insiders, the crème de la crème of New York society, were quietly invited to remain. Inclusion in this clandestine gathering was a rare privilege, reserved for those with impeccable lineage, unblemished reputations, and unwavering loyalty to Mrs. Astor's social order. Old money families, close friends, and a handful of carefully vetted newcomers might find themselves among the chosen few. To be asked to stay was a silent but unmistakable mark of favor, confirming one's place at the very pinnacle of Gilded Age society. The midnight supper itself was a spectacle of refinement and indulgence. Guests dined on delicacies such as terrapin, roast duck, consommé, and exquisite pastries, all served on gleaming silver. The remainder of the night was filled with more drinking, dancing, and most importantly, the establishment of powerful alliances designed to fulfill the common goal of a strategic marriage, even if it was against the wishes of all parties involved, as we see in this next video.